Hey, welcome to the fifth lesson. In this lesson, we will create a small calculator program to reinforce all the knowledge we've gained, and also learn how to generate random numbers. First of all, we will develop a small program together. It will be a simple calculator. And for the development of this program, we will need all the knowledge we have already acquired. So, let's start developing. The first thing I suggest doing is to create a few variables. Let our variables be of type float, and let's name them number 1 and number 2. Since our variables have the same data type, we can write them separated by a comma. I won't specify the values for these variables, as I will be obtaining all the values from the user. Also, before that, let's display a message asking the user to enter our variables. This will serve as a prompt for us to understand what is happening in the program. Now, in addition to the two numbers, we need to obtain some mathematical operation. In other words, I want the user to choose one of the mathematical operators: add, subtract, multiply, or divide. To get such a symbol from the user, we need to create another variable. Let this variable be named math. It will have a data type of char, as we recall that this data type allows storing a single special character. Again, similarly, we will ask the user to input this symbol, and I will assign this symbol to the variable math. So now, I will be getting from the user the first number, the second number, and also any mathematical operation. Now, when I receive data from the user, all that's left is to perform checks, find out what exactly the user is inputting, and depending on that, we will perform different mathematical operations. The checks themselves can be created using if-else statements or switch case statements. For now, I suggest creating checks using if-else, and a bit later, I will rewrite these checks using switch case, and you will clearly see the difference between these approaches. I'll mention right away that switch case would be more convenient in this case simply because we have one variable that can take different values. As you may recall from the previous video, switch case is handy when one variable is checked against multiple values. In general, let's consider both options. So, let's start with if-else. Here, I state that I will be checking the variable math, and if the symbol is set to plus, then I need to perform addition of the numbers and display the result on the screen. Before continuing, let's create another variable at the beginning of the program, result. Now, I will store the result of the addition in this variable. In the same format, I need to add other conditions for different mathematical operators. Here, I perform subtraction for the minus symbol. Similarly, we do it for multiplication and division. At the end of it all, I suggest displaying information on the screen, our variable containing the result. In principle, our program is already ready. That is, we receive two numbers from the user, then a mathematical operation, and depending on the operation entered by the user, the program performs one of the actions related to the variables. After launching, the program prompts for the first number. I'll remind you that we are working with the float data type, so we can input numbers with decimal points. We input the second number and the mathematical operation. Let's enter plus, and there we go, it gave us the answer. Now we have a decent program that works and performs all the necessary actions. Now, as I promised, I will try to rewrite these conditions using switch case. Let's comment out these lines of code. To do this quickly, select the entire code and press Ctrl+ simultaneously. All this code will be commented out for you. Here below, we write the keyword switch and state that we are checking a variable called math. Then we specify different cases. Suppose if the plus symbol is set, in this case, we will also create a variable res and record the addition of our variables in it. Also, don't forget to add the keyword break at the end. In the same format, we add other cases. Just make sure that we correctly change the addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division signs in the necessary places. Here, similar to switch case and if-else, we also add default. This is the operator that triggers whenever the previous cases turn out to be false. Here, I suggest setting res equals 0. Now let's test our program. Enter the first number, input the second number, perform the arithmetic operation, and get our answer. However, in C++, there are some additional mathematical operations. Let's consider these operations below. In addition to all standard mathematical operations, we can mention another mathematical operation. This mathematical operation looks like this. We use the percent sign, and thereby we will now obtain the remainder when dividing one number by another. Let's try an example. Let there be the number 6, followed by the percent sign and the number 4. We run the program and see that the result is 2. This happened because we cannot divide our number 6 evenly by 4, and the first number we can divide evenly is 4. Therefore, we are left with 2 before reaching 6. In the end, the remainder of dividing 6 by 4 gives us 2. Next, let's look at abbreviated operations. Let's create a variable a. Let's say we need to add the number 5 to this variable. In this case, we write the expression a equals a plus 5. This notation is entirely correct, and you can always use it. Here, you can also perform any mathematical expressions such as subtraction, multiplication, division, or even remainder when dividing. But we can shorten this line as follows. We simply write the variable name, then plus equals or dash equals, and so on. And in the end, we get that the value that was previously in the variable, we add 5 to it and write it back to the variable. In other words, if I want to add the number 5 to the current variable, I simply write plus equals 5. Also, let me write how you can quickly add or subtract one. For this, just write the variable name and 2 plus signs. This means that we added 1 to the current number. If we need to subtract 1, just use 2 minus signs. And now, let's consider a topic called namespaces. Earlier, I have repeatedly mentioned that we take these functions for input and output of data to the screen from a namespace called std. In fact, you can write this namespace every time, as we did until this point. However, you can also declare this namespace at the beginning of the program. If you do this, you are essentially saying that in the file itself, you are using the namespace, and it does not need to be written each time. Let's look at this point. At the very beginning of the program, before the main function, we write the following line, using namespace. This means that we are using a certain namespace, and let's add std after it. In this case, now in input and output functions, we don't need to write std each time. Now we can run our program and make sure that there are no errors. In the end, we have reduced the code by declaring the namespace. And finally, what we will cover today is how to generate random numbers. To create a random number, a special function called rand is used. The function returns a number from 0 to 1, meaning it will be a floating point number. This range is not always suitable, and we would like to specify our own range that would be convenient for us. To do this, we need to initially add 1 to the rand function, and also at the end, we must specify that we get the remainder when dividing by some number. So, if you want the rand function to return a random number in the range from 1 to 20, you write 1 at the beginning and 20 at the end. In this case, this line of code will return you a random number from 1 to 20. Of course, let's store the random number in a variable and try to display it on the screen. By the way, now you can see that I also included the std namespace here, and we no longer need to write it in the code. Now let's run the program. We notice that it printed 2. And you may notice that every time you run the program, you see the same number. It's as if a random number was picked once, and it's displayed every time. To fix this situation, we need to add another function at the very beginning, called srand. Inside this function, we specify that there will be no time dependency, and for this, we need to pass another function as the value time and then pass the value null. Now let's check and make sure that we get a random number each time. Throughout this lesson, we have consolidated all the previously acquired knowledge, created a small calculator program, learned to work with various mathematical operations, and also explored the principle of how to generate random numbers. With that, our lesson has come to an end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Goodbye, everyone. Until we meet again.